But I'm looking at her in that doctor's appointment. I'm looking at her thinking, oh, maybe she could do a workbook. Maybe I could write a workbook. And that's how it all got started. So then the idea floated around in my head for about 2.5 years. And I tried to get publishers, but nobody's ever done this before. Nobody's ever written workbooks for seniors specifically, to kind of get their brains going. Nobody thinks about senior brains until it's too late. So I had publishers and literary agents tell me, nope, you've invented a new genre. We don't know if it's going to make any money. Sorry. So not only did I didn't know anything about self-publishing. I didn't know anything about book layout or what program I was going to use, copyright, all that stuff. I had to learn and figure it out and figure out the layout for the books. And I also learned a lot about neurogenesis, and that's making new brain cells.
Welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. Boomer women. Are we wise women? Are we mavens? Are we crones? Hell yeah. And we're also still curious, fun-loving, interesting, the list goes on. This podcast is for you. My guests are folk who have a message for our demographic. And if you want to hear a specific message, let me know and I'll find the guests. This podcast is also a conversation. We women know its value, we know how to do it, and we must perpetuate the art form. I try and let my guests have the greater say, and usually we fit in a good laugh or two. Listen in now to today's guest. For many years, we older adults have been told to keep our brains sharp. Do crossword puzzles, keep reading, stay active, find a hobby. But as time has gone by, the experts have also agreed that keeping on doing the things you've always done might not help stave off dementias and other cognitive issues as much as doing new things. So many of us have always enjoyed crossword puzzles, especially now with the internet. We belong to book clubs, and that's good as we also get some socializing in. Exercise stands alone as it also helps with balance and strength and cardiovascular. Today, I'm going to stay with the cognitive side of possible declines as we age. There's crosswords, there's Wordle, there's Sudoku, but most of us want a bit more than that in our lives. There's Trivial Pursuit and Scrabble and Upwards. You can tell the games I play, but those are hard to play by yourself. Now, I'd love to say there's an app for that, but I'm going to go you one better. I've got a guest for that. You can say that out loud, especially that.
Well, I just love that intro. That's fantastic.
Barb is my guest, and she's making faces at me and thumbs up and things. So I thought, geez, that stuff's got to get out there. Okay. That said, I know very little about Barb, so I can't introduce her very well. We'll get on with the show and let her introduce herself. Barb Giatti, welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast.
Thank you, Agnes. I'm very happy to be here with you. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am talking to you right now from Benzonia, Michigan. It's a tiny little village, and I think if your listeners are familiar with Michigan at all, they've probably still never heard of the biggest city close to me. From a very rural area. But it's where I grew up. I grew up in Honor, Michigan, just down the road, population 300. And my life just kind of had some fun twists and turns. And I ended up living in Europe for about 17 years. And when you're from a town of 300 people, nobody really expects you to grow up to live in Europe. And then when you're living in Europe, you don't really expect that you're going to go back home to that little village and live in your childhood bedroom. But that's what happened. Dementia happened. So I moved back about 4 years ago to care for my parents. My dad had dementia real bad, and my mom currently has Alzheimer's. So that's what brought me back to Michigan. And I brought my very good-looking Italian husband. He's walking by.
Yeah, right. No, I've done some sleuthing. He's good looking.
Okay, thank you. If you're going to get one, get a good looking one, right?
Exactly.
So so that's how I ended up here. And then in the course of taking care of my father in their home for 2 years, I learned a lot about the things we all do wrong when it comes to Alzheimer's prevention. And so I think that's what we're going to talk about is my attempt to help people learn the things we actually can do that work instead of the things we're doing that don't.
I want to stick with dementia for a moment. Full disclosure, my career was in elder care and I love dementia care. When we are 20, 30, 40, we forget something and we go like, oh crap, we don't think about it. I have a lot of older people still in my life and in their 60s, 70s, 80s, even into their 90s, they forget something and they instantly think they're getting dementia. I know.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I know you're not a doctor, but tell us some of the things you've learned about dementia.
Well, I'm in my 50s and I do forget things, but I know not to worry because the golden rule is if you accidentally put something in the refrigerator that doesn't go there, but you realize what you've done, you find it and you think, oh, that doesn't go there, that's silly, or if you misplace your keys, those things don't mean anything. What means something is if you get what a key is for, or you think that the Tide goes in the refrigerator because it's supposed to be there. So those are some kind of clues that, oh, maybe something's not quite right. I was surprised by the range of dementia, and not necessarily the kinds, but how it affects different people. So my dad was the kindest man ever. He never swore in front of us. He was just a blue collar tool and die maker. He was just the nicest guy. All my cousins loved their Uncle Bill. And then when I moved back and moved in with them, he was dropping F-bombs like crazy. And he threw, a chair at me and an ice fishing spear at my husband. And he had just really, and he was still strong. So it was really difficult, but there was no really reasoning because you can't try to bring people to where you are. You have to meet them where they are. That was another thing I learned is like, don't correct them, join them. One of the things my dad did was they built that house in 1969. And one day he said to me that we had to go register the mailbox. Otherwise the mailman wouldn't be able to find us. So we had to go over to the little township hall. So the mailman would be able to find us. Now I know that the mailman has been finding us for over 50 years, but he was somewhere, I guess, had just built the house. So I wrote a little note that said, my father has dementia, please play along. And I took him to the township hall and I handed them the note and they were very kind, just so very kind. And they played along. Okay, yes, sir, Mr. Schnarr, we'll take care of this for you. And it's so much easier to do that and so much better for them than to argue with them. Say, Dad, the mail's right there. Or, there's your mailbox. Or don't worry about that stuff. Just, as long as everybody's safe, and just play along with them, and then you find out things that they probably never would have told you before too, because I don't think my dad knew who I was. I was just that lady in his house that took care of stuff. So, he could talk to me instead of talking to his daughter. He was talking to that lady. And I think that kind of gave us some moments as well. It wasn't just all bad. It was very eye-opening. If you have never been in the house with the person, there is a huge learning curve. Huge. Yeah.
I tell a similar story because I did go also. I moved to my mother's town and bought a big house that we could both live in. And whereas we used to have great laughs, I'm her only daughter, like all my friends thought she was a hoot. And as soon as she moved into my house, she would tell people that I was her jailer. I was locking her up at night. I was stealing her money. She was just really trash talking me. Now, the other part of my past is the fact that I said I was in dementia care. One of the reasons that I loved it and probably was fairly good at it is I loved carrying on those 7 random conversations.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
you can make it fun, and stay where they are, and they're just calm, and they're doing just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it really is interesting. It didn't happen to me, but I have heard other people like their parents revealed these big giant secrets and things like that because they didn't realize they were talking to their children and they never would have told them.
Yeah.
And before, the Alzheimer's set in, they would have just kind of taken it to their grave, so to speak. But, people are finding out things.
Geez, now that you remind me of that. Maybe I'll move to Europe when I get old because my kids are all here.
Oh,
Don't want the kids
oh,
finding out.
Have you run across anybody that has reverted back to their first language? Speaking of going back and forth between Europe and North America, I have friends that work in the industry, and they have people that will just only speak Dutch now because that was their first language, and their English just disappeared. And like, unfortunately, none of the caregivers will speak Dutch or one of the smaller languages like that.
Yeah.
I think that's just fascinating. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but logically it makes sense.
But we had one gentleman in care who was Middle European, I think. I can't remember. It was too many years ago. And he was a little bit grabby with the young female aides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's that fine line. You can't give them hell because it's not the real person doing that. When his brain was healthy, he would never have dreamed of doing that. Anyways, at one point in time,
need to be protected as well.
Well, at some point in time, one of the young women turned around and said, "Opa, no." Well, of course, Opa is Grandpa. And he just looked at her. And it was like, so everybody started calling him Opa, never grabbed a girl again.
That's a fantastic solution.
Yeah.
Because that kind of stuff does get really tricky, that when they lose their, what's the word I'm looking for?
Moral high ground.
Oh my gosh, Agnes, I just lost the word. It happens. It's okay. I'm not worried about it. Their boundaries like that. Yeah, it is tricky. And there's a lot of things that you touched on your mother thinking you were stealing from her. My dad, oh my gosh, we weren't allowed to go in the kitchen. We weren't allowed for 2 years. So I mostly just ate fast food or gas station food laying down in my bed upstairs because anytime we walked into the kitchen, which was a big open plan, so he could see from where he was sitting all the time, even to go clean the refrigerator or anything. Oh boy, there was hell to pay because we were stealing from him, according to him. And it's tough when they get to that point. They cling to people and things. Like, he did not want my mom out of his sight because she grounded him. When he didn't know what else was going on, he knew that she was, something that was safe for him.
The familiar safe. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I get it, but it was, I just really wish it didn't exist.
No, I agree. And I will say from my experience as with the career side of my elder care is one of the hardest things for family is when their parent doesn't know them anymore.
Yeah.
So
I always greeted my dad with, "Hi, Dad." Now, I don't know, because to me, that's placing me in his life. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it ever meant anything. But, like I said, a lot of times I was just that lady. But there was, times where because I'd buy them presents for each other for birthdays and things like that. And, or Christmas or whatever, I would just buy them presents to and from each other. Mm-hmm. And I would try to get my dad to sign the card, and he would trust me. I would say, "Okay, now we're going to do a card for your wife, Cindy," and just, and I would help him write his name and things like that. So there was, times where he trusted me, but other times, oh boy, it was, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. Well, my two thoughts there are, first of all, when you talk about ice picks and eating gas station food for 2 years, is that handsome Italian husband of yours must also be a saint.
He took a job in a restaurant. He had never worked in a restaurant before, but he took a job in an Italian restaurant, just so he could eat proper food.
There's always a solution. That's great.
But he put up with a lot of stuff, and now and everything that we went through, my mom doesn't even recognize him. So it's kind of difficult for, and this was, he first came to America, and we threw him into this situation, and he really did put so much effort and love and kindness into my parents, and it's just gone.
Well,
so
it may be gone, but I still maintain that you just don't know what's still going in.
Right.
I just, I was always careful about that. And my other thought is to commend you, because when parents forget who their child is, oftentimes that's when the child quits visiting or being a part of their life or something. So that's great.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons we're talking today is because of something called senior workbooks. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know a lot about you, but I found you on Instagram because that is your Instagram handle, Senior Workbooks. How did those come about? It sounds as though you were pretty motivated to help your parents.
Yeah. So what happened was, well, my background is in television, actually. So back in college, I took a ton of writing classes that I really didn't use in real life, but I taken them and sort of had them in my pocket. Well, shortly after we moved back, I went to the doctor for my dad. He was doing a cognitive test, and we knew he was going to score real low on it. But it was my father, my mother, and myself in the exam room with the doctor, who has been a family friend for forever. And he was talking to me about, my dad scoring real low and everything. And my mom piped up. She's like, well, I do crossword puzzles. And the doctor shot her right down. He said, those don't help. He said, that's just stuff you already know. You need to learn new things. So I'm looking at my mom, nice lady, but she's a bit older, and she calls the whole internet eBay. Okay. So I'm looking at her thinking, okay, this lady's never going to go on Duolingo and learn a language or anything. She can't operate a smartphone. Like, it's just, and sending her to a website is just setting her up for failure, and then she'll give up, because everything's online now. All the learning tools are online. But I'm looking at her in that doctor's appointment. I'm looking at her thinking, oh, maybe she could do a workbook. Maybe I could write a workbook. And that's how it all got started. So then the idea, I'm telling you, the idea floated around in my head for about 2.5 years. And I was like, and I tried to get publishers, but nobody's ever done this before. Nobody's ever written workbooks for senior citizens specifically, to kind of get their brains going. Nobody thinks about senior brains until it's too late. So I had publishers and literary agents tell me, nope, you've invented a new genre. We don't know if it's going to make any money. Sorry. So not only did I didn't know anything about self-publishing. I didn't know anything about book layout or what program I was going to use. And then I was going to have to learn all that copyright, all that stuff. I had to learn and figure it out and figure out the layout for the books. And I also learned a lot about neurogenesis, and that's making new brain cells. And a lot of our seniors just get parked in front of a TV. So I don't know what they've got in Vancouver, but so here where I live, they'll watch the news all day, then Wheel of Fortune, then Jeopardy, then back to the news. And they won't move their bodies, and just kind of melts your brain. So putting the learning into a book and format that they're used to, and something they can do on their own, and turn off the TV for a while and work on a module or two, and have, enjoy that and learn something, get the brain going, and then, go back to watching TV if you want. But move your body, please. But, but that's just how this got started. And I'll tell you what, my mom, she's kind of past the point where these are going to help her a lot, but she loves doing them. And so now I have 5 of them that I'm just so thrilled with these things, because they're the books that I would have given to my parents if something like this existed. The closest thing I can think of is maybe like a 2nd grade, that's grade 2, homeschool kind of book for kids. Those kind of things are okay, but they're kind of geared towards kids. Mine are written for adults, the topics they may have learned before. I mean, I'm all over the place, and that's on purpose, because I want to keep the people engaged. So it'll be about maple syrup or Spain or bees or rainbows or pugs or the moon. And, they'll finish up a module, say on pineapples, and then it'll switch to something completely different, like Norway, because I really want them to enjoy the books and learn in a format that they're used to.
Well, I did some homework, and
Okay.
while I was looking at your workbooks, I was reminded that just recently an elderly client was asking me about rainbows, and I'd forgotten most of what I knew.
Yeah.
I saw the subject of paleontology, and that got me excited because in my youth, I really wanted to be an archaeologist.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
There was Greek mythology, and I love asking my 13-year-old grandson about Greek mythology because he knows more than any other 10 people I know. Butterflies. Last
Yeah.
week, my friend and I were wondering how butterflies could end up in England without starving as they blew across the Atlantic. And then 2 weeks ago, my podcast guest was most professional and informative until she broke into howls of laughter when I questioned her about her not so secret life in New Orleans. So
Agree.
there you go. Now, before our listeners say, okay, Agnes has just given it all away, I don't need to buy the book. That was just one topic out of each of your 5 books.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. What I do. Oh, go ahead, Agnes.
No. I was just you're probably going to answer. How do you decide?
Well, kind of whatever's on my mind, because I don't answer to anybody for these things, right? So I can write about whatever I want. So some things I'm really interested in, but I'll tell you, I have a little pug called Mushu, and I was trying to figure out topics for one of the books one day, and she walked by. I was like, oh, pugs, that'll be cool. And Italy is in there. I vary the books. Like I make sure I don't put like 2 food things together, or I don't put too many countries in one book or things like that. I mean, I do think about stuff like that, but really it's just kind of things I think of and that I think would be interesting. And like you were saying about the rainbows, I know I learned all that stuff before, but a long time ago. So when I'm doing these, a lot of it's new for me, even though I learned it maybe in high school or grade school.
Yeah.
But it's long gone, replaced with other stuff that how you kind of compartmentalize. It's really neat for me. There's a lot of countries. I've been to a few countries, but there's a lot I haven't been to. I haven't been to Japan, but I wrote a module on it so I could learn a little bit about Japan. So yeah.
So this is almost like self-therapy.
It is.
You'll be writing books for the rest of your life just to keep your own brain stimulated.
Right. Yeah, I know. I do think about that. It's like, oh, I hope it doesn't get to the point where one day I'm like, oh, this is a nice book. This looks fun. But what I do is I write 2 pages about a topic. So let's take, say, turtles. So I write 2 pages about turtles, which again, if you don't have, I don't think about turtles very much. It's like not something that's on my radar. So it was cool. So I learned and I wrote 2 pages about turtles. And then every module has the same format. So it's always a bunch of follow-up fill in the blank questions. It's usually around 10 fill in the blank questions. And then I have a word scramble. I asked them to write 2 paragraphs about that topic because I want people writing as well. I have a crossword puzzle in there as a learning tool, not a standalone, but as a learning tool, and a word search as well. And then I even put in a coloring page because, if they're interested in coloring, that's great. There you go. Adult coloring books are fabulous.
Yeah, I love them.
And so, I always, because I do go to craft and farmers markets and things like that. And for a long time I would throw in a little box of colored pencils. I need to get some more, but just so they have them, so they do them. And then, like I said, I switched to something completely different. I can't remember exactly the order, but so let's say we've just done I don't put the answers in.
I was going to
That's
ask you about that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't put the answers in the books at all, because the whole point is learning. Now, when I think back about when I took algebra, you know, in math, every other answer was in the back of the book. And so I could kind of look at it and figure it out backwards. I could reverse engineer
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But this one, even for the puzzles, I don't put the answers in, because I think that the working on trying to remember for the crossword puzzle what they just read, so they have to go back and look, and then they read it again, and then and figure it out. And so I don't expect people to read the 2 pages once and then just remember everything, although some people might. I know I wouldn't, but they a lot of times people will have to go back and forth, and so hopefully it sinks in and gets the the neuroplasticity in your brain going, and the neurogenesis and everything. That's the whole goal, is to keep your brain healthy with these.
Well, I would also, because of my background, suggest that you need to go to seniors' residences and promote these to the rec therapy department.
Absolutely.
Because whether it's one-on-one or in a small group, I mean, you start talking about Italy or turtles, out of a group of 6, 2 people are going to be able to say something about that or ask a question
Yep.
or something, and
I
conversation is just as good as a lot of other things.
Socializing is huge. There's 5 things you can do to help your brain. Learn new things, move your body, get enough sleep, eat brain healthy food, and socialize. Those 5 things are the best you can do. It doesn't guarantee anything, but that's the best thing you can do for your brain as far as prevention goes. So I found with senior centers, I talked to a lot of activity directors and things like that, and they love the books. They're going nuts over them. But here's the thing. A lot of times they would buy one and make copies. And while I want to help people, also, this is my livelihood. So I finally came up with a licensing system. So for elder care centers and places like that, I have a discounted price, but they have to buy X amount based on how many beds they have.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Just so, but I think these would make amazing welcome gifts for any elder care center. Just when they arrive, here's your new home, and enjoy this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. You've got other books as well, though.
I do. So I have a couple Kindle books, and these were kind of a way to draw people into the workbooks. I don't have a huge marketing budget. I'm just doing this on my own. I don't have a marketing team. I don't have really any help. So I do every single thing, from layout to advertising to everything I do. So you can write a Kindle book and publish it and have direct it to your website. If people like it, they can read it. So but I did do 2 books. One on Kindle. One is a guide to seniors and neurogenesis. What is it? And why is it important? And then another one is about sleep and how important that is with seniors. And I think I've got those priced really cheap, like $2.99 or something. And they're just little guides and stuff that we never think about, especially people who never had to work with seniors. We don't think about, we think, oh, they get up so early and they eat dinner at 4 o'clock. But we need to make sure that they're actually getting enough good sleep, because there's sundowning happens because their brains just kind of, they've been awake all day, or maybe a nap or two, but primarily they've been awake all day, and their brain, the blood is, not getting to where it needs to be because they need to sleep. They need to recline. They need to recharge their brain. So sundowning, just the quick little version of it, is like when they really aren't making sense anymore, if they normally make sense during the day, or they're having issues walking around or things like that, or they get lost even inside their own house, things like that, where they normally wouldn't during the day. They really need to sleep, and they need to get good, proper sleep. Often people like my dad would go to bed, but then he'd get up and he'd around midnight and he'd take off. He'd open the door or he'd just go sit on the porch. And my mom would yell at me to come down and go outside and sit with him. And I had to get up at 5:30 the next morning for work, but I'd go outside and sit on the porch with my dad, just be there. And then the same thing would happen the next night. And I'd say, Mom, I can't do this every night. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, I just did this last night. She said, no, you didn't. No, okay. So, you know, they also, their bodies just need a chance to recharge and process food and, just get back on track. The sleep is critical. I mean, it's in that top 5 that I said about, the things you can do to help prevent Alzheimer's or push it back at least. I never say that I can prevent it because I can't,
Delay.
Yeah, but at least try to push back the onset. There's no magic bullet right now. I think people need to realize this too. There's no one pill you can take because there's so many causes of Alzheimer's disease. People are always looking for the magic bullet. Okay, well, if I take this, I won't get Alzheimer's. Yeah, that doesn't work that way, so just doing those 5 things can help try to push back the onset.
Yeah. Well, and if only because you're at least feeling like you're doing something positive, constructive. And as a caregiver, you're talking about sleep. It's so important the caregiver gets enough sleep too, which means supports for the caregiver.
Absolutely. A lot of caregivers get lost.
Yeah.
They're just trying because their whole life becomes this other person's life. It is really, really hard on caregivers.
Well, I don't know what your mom was like, but I mean, a lot of spouses try to cover up their spouse's dementia as well.
My mom, she actually didn't realize what was going on with my dad.
Okay.
So she didn't realize how bad it was. And then she would forget every day how bad it had been the day before. So a lot of times she was just living her normal life. And there was a lot of me putting all the pieces back together, And then it bothers me though. People always say, because when you're caregiving, and there's a lot of stuff about like, oh, take a spa day, or, oh, make sure you go on a girls trip with your friends, or, have that 3 glasses of wine. None of that is possible. I'm telling you, as someone, none of that is possible. I couldn't leave my parents. I couldn't, and my mom, especially after my dad passed, my mom refused to be alone. Absolutely refused. But my husband and I both still had to work. So there would be a few hours where we just couldn't be there. And if I wrote down in big numbers, Barb is home at this time. And we got her one of the dementia clocks, that are real nice with the date and the day and everything. And if I was 5 minutes late, like maybe I got stuck at a store in a line or something, she would call the police because I had abandoned her. And that wasn't the case at all. Or she would call my brother who lived way out in Washington State. And then I was the bad guy. And, because he would believe her, because why not? That's his mom, So it was, there was nobody I could get to stay with my mom for more than 2 days. So my husband and I were able to take off a couple times. My cousin would come over, but she was done at 2 days. That's it. She didn't want to do anymore. But there was times my husband and I would like to, we wanted to go out for dinner early, like maybe 5 o'clock. And my mom would call when we were on the way there saying, come home right now. You come home right now. Just because it was all about her not being alone. Yeah, I wasn't able to go take a spa day. I'm sorry. Caregivers, if you're in the thick of it, you just have to become that. It's all about the other person. It's not about you at all.
Well, and as you were saying that, I thought, jeepers, a caregiver goes on a spa day, they may never go home again.
Right?
This is the way I should be living.
Here's your chance. Take it. I did, a lot for my parents, and I don't regret it at all. But it was really, really tough. That's why. So my name is Barb Giatti, but I write under the name Barbara Schnarr, which was my maiden name. And I do that to honor my father, because even though I got the idea because of some things my mom and the doctor had said, he was the reason we moved home from Europe, to take care of him. And my dad was a really cool guy. So, this is all for him. And I know he would be proud of these things that I'm doing. I mean, like I said, I'm just a regular person. I'm not a doctor, none of that stuff, but trying to help. And you also got to think that it's not just hard on us, it's hard on the person as well. I don't know ever what he felt like, because he couldn't articulate that anymore. But I know it was hard on him, and not just not being able to find a word, or finding the word that was close to the word he wanted, but it wasn't quite right, and he knew it, and that kind of stuff. Not just that stuff, but like just knowing that something's wrong and not being able to fix it with his mind, knowing that, okay, something's wrong. And that's got to be so scary.
Well, and I hope you take the time to realize that, as dreadful as all of that dementia was, maybe is your mother still alive? Or
My mom's alive,
Yep.
and she has a nice lady that takes care of her now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all I was thinking is the gift to you is this new career, these workbooks, this, like you would probably never have done that if you hadn't come home to, especially your parents' dementia. You might not have cared quite as much about your next door neighbor or something.
No, I'd never in a million years. I mean, dementia, people had it. I have a lot of aunts that had it and things like that, but it never really touched my life, my immediate family. And then when it did, it really did. But I would never have thought of something like this before. There's a wonderful Australian lady named Leonie Dawson, and she has these really cool workbooks that you do every year for your life. You kind of set out some goals that you want to do, 100 small goals, and then the really big ones and all this. And I've always liked doing her workbooks. And I'm working on Italian, and I found that I learned well out of workbooks and stuff. And so that piece just kind of fit. And then having all those writing classes a million years ago kind of fit. And my parents getting sick kind of fit. And, and so it all kind of worked out together magically, like,
The universe had a plan for you like 35 years ago.
It did. It did.
Now, the other thing I'm going to throw in here is, if I saw correctly on Amazon, this has all come about this year.
Yes, Variety Volume 1, which is the first one, the Blue Book, was published January 15th.
It's pretty impressive.
So, thank you. I like I said, they kind of floated around in my head for about 2.5 years. And the first book, it took a really long time to write and get it right. And since I'm self-publishing, I'd have to get a proof sent to me, and then it'd be like, oh my gosh, these graphics are all fuzzy. What's going on here? All that kind of stuff. But then I had a system. Once I figured out everything that I had to learn and everything I was doing wrong, then I had a system, and then it just came. So now I've got the 5. I've got 4 variety books and 1 book that's just American cities. And I had planned on doing another one that's just animals this year, but I'm not going to get to it. I'm kind of like thinking, okay, this is it for now. So 2023 has been about writing, so much writing. And then 2024 is actually when I'm going to start working really hard on the translations, because my goal is to be able to so I have 2 goals. One is to help educate people that they need to keep learning. And even if they don't buy my books, figure out a way to keep learning. The other thing is I want to have these available all over the world in local languages. And I'm really excited and I have the first one done in Spanish now. So I'm super excited about that. But 2024 is going to be the huge marketing push and the translations. And then maybe I'll go back to writing again. And then I actually do have a couple just plain old word search books that I made on Amazon. They're just for fun. They don't help you or anything. But, sometimes I notice that when I do craft markets and things like that, I do a nice one in Traverse City, Michigan every Saturday in the winter. People aren't really, some buy the workbooks, and that's great. Others are like, I don't know if she's going to like it or not, So I have some word search books set up that they can get. And then, like I said, I don't have a marketing budget, so I always have my website everywhere on those, and trying to get them to go to buy the workbooks, which is the whole point.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so I've got 3 large print word search books right now. So,
Well, you can tell people who don't want to buy the workbooks that I said that it's a cop out because
yeah,
you should be able to make a topic of conversation out of almost anything.
I really like that. I really like that. You meet new people, and I'm sure the other person won't know as much about pineapples as you do if you
But
do the book, right?
but earlier in our conversation, you said that people are learning things about their parents that because the parents don't realize they're talking to their kids and they're letting go these
Oh yeah,
family secrets. Who knows that there isn't a family secret that they worked on a banana farm in Australia for 2 years? That sort of thing.
right.
You know,
That's
just you don't know everything about your parent.
I forgot. I actually have another series. This is just this tiny little one-off things that I did because I had a repeat customer, and he told me that his wife really liked the books because she wanted to practice writing because she'd had a stroke. So that kind of inspired me to do just these little writing prompt books. It's 50 writing prompts, and it's things like write about a time you were proud of yourself, or what's your favorite recipe and why, or what was something that really scared you and how did you overcome it? And so I've got those in English and then a handful of other languages right now, but I think those are kind of neat too because they'll stick around, and so the children can maybe find this book that the parent was practicing writing in and say, wow, I never knew that about my mom. I never knew that was this, really scary for her, or
Well, it's
things
interesting
like,
because I have in my notes here that you have OT writing prompts. Now,
yeah,
when I think of writing prompts, I think of things like, what do you tell us about the colors of the leaves in the fall? But if
yeah,
it's actually about their own lives, that is
yeah,
hugely valuable to family
yeah. So
members.
it's all questions about themselves. Everybody likes talking about themselves, right? So it's kind of all over the place. What's your favorite movie? Why? Write about it. And it's just like one page, lined page that they can do. And yeah, so, and this was because, you know, my books are great, but the writing, and see, there's all these things I'm learning along the way too, in talking to people. So, I had this idea and I didn't really tell anybody, but my husband heard a lot about it before. He's still hearing all about this all the time. But but in talking to customers and as I do these markets and go to bookstores and whatnot, I never would have thought about having, like, I just had a little bit of writing in there, but I never would have thought of having like a writing prompt book for people that have had strokes.
But
It just,
but
yeah.
as you get older, you have arthritis, you have all sorts of things that can happen. Even if that
Mhm.
elder cannot sit right anymore, it's a perfect prompt book for the child or grandchild who's going, instead of just the usual, "Well, how did you meet? You and dad meet."
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
other questions that they could
Oh,
be
that's
asking to
fantastic.
get a really good insight. And the younger person can do the writing for that matter, but boy, it can really open up some conversation or hit the record button on your phone or your tape recorder.
I'll tell you what, Agnes, when this actually takes off and I, am able to hire someone, I'm going to hire you to be my pitch person because this is fantastic, just absolutely fantastic. The things you're saying and the ideas.
Yeah,
So,
well, this is great. Okay, now let me go through. Actually, do you have any advice? Just going strictly into the business now. Do you have any advice for a listener who might be sort of thinking, "Oh, I've had this idea. It may be books, it may be knitting books, it could be anything." Because it sounds like you had a learning curve, but then boom, when you hit the market, you've just been so
yeah.
prolific this year.
Well, thank you. Yeah, just do it. It doesn't do anybody any good sitting in your head. You will feel 1,000 times better once you get it out there. And if you don't want to go through a publisher, and the cons for both self-publishing and using a publisher, I self-publish. It works really well for me. I'm able to do that through Amazon. Amazon has a publishing thing, as does Barnes and Noble, BN Press. They do print on demand as well. Lulu.com is a good resource. There's a whole bunch of print on demand. I would stick with the big names like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Lulu, those ones. never pay anybody. Like if somebody says, oh, I'll publish your book and I'll do all this for you. No, because there's places that'll do it for free or pay you. So I've actually had this conversation. Somebody was saying that what I was doing, oh, that costs $500, you only get 6 books. I'm like, what are you even talking about? Through Amazon KDP, they're publishing. And I said, no, it doesn't. But she had found this third party thing that would do the exact same thing that I had done for myself and charge her $500. There's a fabulous book. It's called Self-Published Millionaire, and it's by 2 guys over in England. And they write music instruction and music theory books, and they've been wildly successful. Don't expect you're going to be a millionaire tomorrow. Here's the biggest thing is, in my brain, everybody could use these books. Why aren't you getting this for your dad? All the stuff. It takes a real long time for your books to take off, but don't give up. And then you'll be inspired to do other stuff too. But get a book like Self-Published Millionaire. I just happen to get it on Audible. I listen to Audible all the time in my car. And this was fantastic. And so then I bought a print copy and gave it to that lady who told me the story about having to pay $500. I'm like, no, you got to read this. But it has a whole bunch of really good marketing information in there, why you should build your email list and all that. Just do it. You'll feel better when it's done.
Well, two thoughts is, first of all, I will plug my own podcast here. Last June, I interviewed Alexa Nazaro, and she has a publishing company back east in Toronto, and she had so many good thoughts. Like, I mean, obviously she was promoting her own business, but she also gave so much more information. So you can go, a listener can go listen to that. But also now I have forgotten the second thought.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because I have actually thought about, should I have Canadian versions? So both in English and Canadian French. Because when I do this, I do want to have like the King's English, the British version. I know Canadians, you're kind of a hybrid between American and British English. So I was wondering, should I do that? And then with the French Canadian as well, because that's different than France French.
Yeah.
So what do you think as a Canadian? Would you mind if like I promoted my book in American English up there, or are you just kind of used to it? Or
I think we're pretty used to it now. I must admit, if I'm talking to a Canadian, I'll say Z. If I'm talking to an American, I say Z. So I think I might not be the right person to ask about that.
Okay.
That said, if you were to do something as simple as change, color from COLOR to COLOUR, those little things, right. I think most of us notice that. But
okay,
oops, rearrange my
you're
office
fine,
here.
but you do notice, yeah. I think that the quintessential Canadian spelling word is colorization, because you do the OUR like the Brits would do, and you do the zation with the Z, as the Americans would do.
Okay,
so you see, use like
that's where I'm not the right person to ask, because my mother was English. Okay. So I spell mum, M-U-M. I interchange S and Z depending on the word and what I'm thinking about at the time. So yeah, I'm not the right person to be asking these questions. So.
All right. Maybe I'm going to go listen to the publisher podcast and track her down. But no, there's just write your book, just get it on paper. Now, because mine rely a lot on pictures and things like that, I did get a program called InDesign by Adobe, the people that make Photoshop. And I don't know InDesign. I didn't know anything. I'd never heard of it before, but a graphic artist friend told me I should use that. So I got it. And I can only do what I need to do in InDesign. I've only learned what I need to do. And so you can actually make a whole book, just kind of figuring things out. I write on my my Google Drive account. I just write it all up. If I didn't have to have pictures in it, you can just save a document as a PDF and upload it to these places, bn.com, which actually I'm not sure it must be available in Canada. BN.com, definitely Amazon. And Amazon also lets you choose the primary marketplace. So my books in English are all .com, but the books I do in other languages like Italian or Swedish or Dutch, I do like Italian is Amazon.it. I make that the primary market for that. Or Netherlands NL or Sweden Amazon.se kind of thing.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I will throw in that when I was researching your books in Canada, I would click, because I followed one of your links. So it went to Amazon.com. And when I was looking at one of the books, it said, this is not available. And so I went, oh, this is curious. So I changed the .com to .ca, which is how I shop. Because Amazon knows where you are. There are no secrets in the world. And boom, everything was available.
Oh, okay, good.
So
good.
It was just, they didn't want to deliver from an American whatever to Canada. It was just
okay
through Canada. Yeah, you buy through
all right.
Canada.
I do need to check when I'm hitting publish on these books, the very first, just getting each new one on Amazon. The books, the senior workbooks, they've got a lot of color pictures in them, and there's something about Australia and Japan. Now, I'm not sure if they're not available or if they're available with a different setup or something. I really need to look into that. But again, if you're if you're writing a book that's just words, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's super easy. And your cost. So I sell a lot face to face. I'm out there. I did 2 markets this past weekend. And I have a regular job and, all that. So I'm always out there meeting the public. That is a good way to make money from your books and not have to pay the Amazon fees. Now you'll have to pay a little bit to get the book, but so my books cost a bit more up front just because, like I said, they're big and the colors and they're thick and all that. But if you have just a thin-ish black and white book, it's only going to cost you a few dollars. And then when you go out and sell it in person, you can sell it for whatever you want. So that's a good way to, and, people will stop and talk to you at your booth. And oh boy, I get some really interesting people. When I have my table set up, oh, my mom does this, or, that kind of thing, or I get it. I had to take care of my dad, all that kind, people, it's affecting a lot of people.
2025, your goal is to have group therapy sessions
right
for all the caregivers that need to unload. Oh,
exactly. I could have just like circle time when I'm doing these markets.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I'm sorry, I was checking the time over there in case you're wondering why I keep on leaning over there. I have 3 monitors, so there's always something going on with the monitor. Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
What's with macaroni and cheese?
You mean a craft dinner? No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, KD. If it's KD, it's KD. Sure.
What's with it?
Yeah. Do you like KD craft dinner?
I do. I don't get to eat it as much now that I live with an Italian, but or I don't think he's ever tried like that kind of actually, or I don't even know if he's ever had macaroni and cheese, but I love it.
Okay, on your Facebook, I dig, because I try to ask every one of my guests
that picture,
a personal question.
That picture. Okay, I know what you're talking about now, folks. If you want to go to society31.com, that is a really neat site where artists can upload their stuff and put it on curtains and clocks and all that, and like proper artists. It's really good stuff. And, I was just fumbling around one day on Facebook and this ad came up for that on a clock. And it's this lady and she's sort of macaroni and cheese and she's draped over a spoon. It sounds way more suggestive. Well, I guess it is kind of, but it's like, and she's like, and then she's got this cheese sauce and everything. This is what you're talking about, right? I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That could have been a heck of a tangent. But I just found this picture and I just had to have it. And then, I don't know. I just put it up for, I think I had it as my profile picture for a while, just because I just love this picture so much. So, and I'm supporting an artist somewhere, someone like me who probably, has a really great thing going, but it's just not taken off yet. So I just love that website. They have so much fun stuff. I had a photographer come in earlier today, a local photographer. She's just getting started, so we're kind of helping each other out. And because I needed author photos, and she's like, "Oh, I love your curtains." I'm like, "Oh my God, go to Society 31."
Well, because it's a bit of an avatar, or it looked like a bit of an avatar, I was thinking, oh my God, is this something that Facebook is doing that we don't know about? But that's hilarious. I'll put the link to cool. in your show notes. That's great.
Right. And it's not me in the picture. It's just a picture I found, and I
really okay. Oh darn, I was wanting some juicy scoop here, but
talk to me here. We'll see.
You're right. Okay, where do we find you on the World Wide Web?
I am the easiest place to find me, and then to see a little video about what I do and why I do it and events that I'll be at and all that would be seniorworkbooks.com. Amazingly, that hadn't been taken already. So,
oh, that's good.
And then everywhere, Insta, TikTok, Facebook, it's all Senior Workbooks. My company name is Cerebrat, CEREBRAT, like celebrate, but with an R. And that means to use your brain. So perfect. So Cerebrat Senior Workbooks. If you Google it, you'll see that. And like I said, you might see things that say Barb Giatti. That's my name. But the books are written under Barbara Schnarr, SCHNARR. And that's, like I said, to honor my dad. So, yeah.
Great. Okay. The website link is in the show notes. And there'll be a whole bunch of links now that we've had this conversation on your page at our website.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll link it all up too. Yeah, this is exciting.
Great.
So
okay.
I'm just trying to think. If you're in the northern Michigan area, you'll see me around. I'm starting to get a little traction. I'm in a couple stores. Oh, I just got into a store in Connecticut. So I'm really excited about that. If you're a retailer, you can go and you use fair.com, FAIRE. They've got some wholesale prices there. I've got, if you have a elder care center or you want to order books of more than 8, contact me. We'll hook you up with the wholesale prices.
You don't need a marketing manager. You're doing just fine on your own. Okay, listeners, if you have thoughts on today's show, talk to us. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at the Boomer Woman's podcast at boomwithabang.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and talk to us there. Or if you've got some questions for Barb that I didn't ask, or something caught your attention over the laughter, ask it in the comments. I'll get you an answer. Leave stars and reviews where you can. They do help us grow. Share this episode with everyone you know who has a senior in their life. If you have a senior in your life, buy them at least one. The other thing that I saw, and we talked about this, the other thing I saw a lot of during my career in elder care was sitting in silence because the younger person didn't know what to talk about. Now, you and I just finished discussing that. Any one of Barb's books would give you all sorts of things to chat about or look up. I can't tell you how often I go to see a client and I take my tablet and something comes up and it's like, well, we can look that up. So,
that's smart.
Barbara Schnarr Giatti, thank you for being my guest today and telling us about your amazing books. And yeah, it sounds like you're on a roll.
Thank you. Yeah, this is so dear and close to my heart, and I just want to help as many people as I can.
Yeah. Have a great rest of the week.